Hello, looks like we're back.
Yeah, we are set up for the AM session. Is anyone able to hear the echo? Is it good? Yeah. Thank you to all the speakers for taking their time and sharing the knowledge with us. And now it's time to answer the questions which we have from all the developers out there. So let's take the first question. And this question is for Hiren. Can we add AMP to Angular PWA using Angular CLI? Oh, wow, this is like all the stacks combined. So Hiren, would you like to go ahead and answer?
Yeah, sure. So Angular CLI does not have any inbuilt support for AMP, but what you can do certainly is if you have your Angular application which is not single page, and let's say for example you have a page 1 and page 2, page 1.html and page 2.html, then what you can do is that you can create AMP version of those pages and convert Angular apps to AMP or add a power of AMP into Angular. But Angular CLI does not have anything or any command which you can use for adding the AMP feature, because AMP is altogether a separate framework, and Angular CLI does not have any support for now. But this is how you can add AMP to your Angular application.
So, I mean, Stephen, do you have something to add here? I mean, of course, we are talking about Angular CLI. So, would you like to add something for AMP support? I mean, of course, difficult question.
Yeah, no, everything he said is right. So we don't have support for this natively. We have talked a lot about this, where like we've even used the term AMPWA Angular, so AMP Angular, to talk about this idea of this kind of ideal combination of PWAs plus AMP, where you load an AMP page first, it's like server-side rendered, and then you load the PWA in the background, and then every additional navigation ends up being served by the PWA. We don't have any built-in support for this, but we have seen a couple people doing it using Angular Universal, where you use some sort of server-side rendering in order to make sure all the static AMP tags exist, and then the PWA kind of loads in the background and replaces things.
Wow. Thank you, Stephen. Okay, so the next question is from Serkan. I think it's Ashok. What happens when I have a big React application and React is constantly adding new API for better performance? I mean, how easy it is to refactor the whole application for the new API? I'm sure this question is around how to update to the new API if you have existing APIs.
Yeah, so any specific migration is pretty much like painful. Okay, like either I mean, if you take the example of Angular, the migration is pretty smooth, and that's why a CLI in any specific technology or tool is pretty much helpful. But in case of React, we don't have a CLI, and this kind of refactoring like they did in 16.8 and other specific versions in React, it's pretty much painful. But you have to understand that where and how you are looking at your migration, what is the points and what is the gain of that particular activity you're trying to achieve. And if that weight is actually weighed out in that particular perspective, that where you have to migrate, then you have to plan it in a way so that it can be less painful compared to computers. Don't actually go for overall migration at once. Start by picking smaller pieces, smaller chunks of your code, and start doing migration into that. Code mods are going to be very helpful if you're going to plan out these kind of migrations, and specifically you're going to end up having a lot of ASTs and just renaming and removing all those older APIs to the new APIs. So code mods going to be really handy in that particular scenario. But yeah, again, you have to be a little bit conscious in that particular direction, that is that migration is really going to worth it. I mean, last year I did some migration in my old companies, and that was not on the front-end technology but on the back-end technology. But the challenges are pretty much similar. If you don't have built-in tool for migration in the technology you are using, then it's going to be all manual operation. And because of that manual operation, you end up creating that mess around the migration itself. So I would suggest, if you're planning to migrate and if you want to use that new APIs which your tool and technology is released, you have to first check that what kind of benefit is going to add. Either it's going to be helpful in your specific use case or not. If it is, then plan out the migration in a smaller chunk, like spit out into your project into multiple parts and see that which particular portion of your app require that migration immediately, and where you're gonna get the the most of it, and based on that you can plan your migration.
Thank you for that wonderful answer, Ashok. I think next question is from Rajat Gupta. It's for Nivita. So can you please share good resources to get started with dynamic component in Angular? So Nivita, yeah.
Yeah, yes, Suresh. So as for the resources are considered for dynamic components or for any resources, like these are the like steps I always do. So first, I'd always check the official documentation for that particular information, right? So for Angular dynamic components, we have the official Angular documentation site, angular.io/docs, which gives a brief explanation of what dynamic components along with examples and explanation. So that's a pretty good resource to start off with. And as far as any specific problems are considered, where I'm stuck, I'll always go for Google or Stack Overflow. Most of the times, they kind of save our lives, right? And even after that, if we're not able to find a solution for a particular problem, we always have the wonderful community members like Stephen Santosh here in Twitter who will always help us with the problem. So these are the sort of steps that I always go through, like to find any solution for a problem.
Thank you, Nivita. So, Stephen, would you like to add something? I mean, this question can be represented in another term. Like, if I have any question related to Angular, how should I get started? I mean,
Yeah. So when it comes to dynamic components, you have to dig into a little bit about what someone means by dynamic components. If they mean a component that changes, I mean, you can do all that with your kind of Angular template syntax. If you're trying to say a component that is assembled at runtime, kind of this higher order component, that is something that is more challenging because we require the compiler right now. So you can use something like JIT to create a dynamic component. We see a lot of tooling vendors out there doing that. But you could also mean, for example, a dynamically loaded, like a lazy loaded component, where you can actually do this now, or you can, with Ivy in version 9, you can actually load just a component and then apply its module syntax separately or at the same time. But we don't give any official recommendations on this because we're working behind the scenes to try and make all of these APIs simpler and make sense, so that when we start pushing this in the world, everyone does it the same way. And so people are kind of waiting on us for best practices, but some of these things are definitely possible now, especially in Ivy.
yeah. Thank you, Stephen. Next question is from Ujjwal. Is there any expected date or time of arrival for web stories plugin in WordPress? This question is for Aman.
Okay, thanks for this question. Actually, AMP Web Stories plugin is already available in beta, and you can download it. It's not official on the WordPress plugin store, but you can download it. And I guess there was already a shared link that was circulated about that, and I'll be sharing that link again so that we can get that and share it out. Yep.
Thank you, Aman. So let's move on to the next question. And this next question is from Arpan. And his question is, what could be some good alternatives to Angular material? Stephen, for you.
Sure. It's a great question, because in general, we build Angular material to be a great manifestation of the material design philosophy from Google, as well as a really great example library that focuses on things like accessibility, internationalizability, all these animations. But we actually have a really great list on our Angular.io website, where if you go to angular.io/resources, you can actually see a list of a whole bunch of UI toolkits. We've got things from like American Express has a toolkit. You've got toolkits like Ant Design. You've got toolkits like Bootstrap, Clarity. Ignite has a bunch of UI components. So I would say there are really, really great UI toolkits out there. And there's too many to call out. So I would definitely just take a look at the list on AUIO resources. And I will also say that if you are a component library author out there, we we accept PRs. So if you want to be listed on that list and you meet some kind of quality bar in terms of notability and the quality of your implementation, send us a PR and let's get you added to the list as well.
Okay, so the next question is from Lalit. If we write CSS inline, we will end up duplicating CSS in our HTML page. So how you suggest to avoid that? This question is for Hiren.
Okay, yes. So AMP has a limitation of inline CSS that you can have only 75 KB of CSS in your page. So here what I would suggest is that if you have such requirement that when you want to have a kind of a global CSS, you can still load it with the AMP script, and you can have it loaded inside your page. But yeah, when you are using AMP pages, you can have a different CSS on the different pages. So this could happen, but still you can do what you can do is that you can load it inside your AMP script page, and you have to make sure that you are not duplicating pages, and you are not duplicating CSS. You just create reusable classes and edit in all other pages. So this is how you can do that, because as we have mentioned that AMP does not allow any external resources or any external CSS files, so you have to use only the inline CSS. So this is how you have to do that. So yeah, there could be a chances that some of your CSS declaration is duplicated, but if you want to use the power of AMP, then this is, you have to deal with it. But as I said, maximum 75 KB of CSS is allowed. So this is how you can have a page specific CSS on each page. So yeah, this is what we can do.
Yep. Just to add to this question, Hiren. So in JavaScript world, we have something called post CSS plugin, right? Which actually tree shakes our CSS. So can we use some plugins like that in maybe in AMP?
Plugin will not be possible, because as we have said that the AMP.js, which is the inbuilt JS for what it does is that it actually eliminates the external resources and does not allow it, because it is, as I said, if something is wrong with the external resources, then it may break your page application, whole page. So it is not allowed. So external plugin will not be possible to use. We just have to use and we just have to go for the inline CSS.
Oh, okay.
Also, to add on to that, like there is a way to externally load the web, like the CSS that you are doing, by just including the AMP style and then including the external source. And if you are just using the inline head code inside your AMP CSS, and if you validate it, and if it's having duplicates in terms of classes, it will automatically give it as an AMP error. And you cannot use any important tag in the AMP CSS also. So ultimately, you won't have any duplicates at all if it's a valid AMP page.
Yes.
That's cool. I mean, having important is always painful. Okay, so sorry. Yep. So the next question which we have is from TechBook Can. Can we use AMP with Vue.js or any other front-end framework? I think this question is pretty much similar to what we had earlier. So Aman, would you like to answer this question?
Yep. So AMP directly doesn't support, if you want to create 100% AMP valid page, then you cannot have any other JavaScript framework. But there have been use cases where you can use AMP as a component and can include them in different frameworks like Vue.js. Also, there is a very good support with Next.js, and people are creating something called as canonical AMP URL, like a same copy of the same website, also in an AMP version, so that it loads fast in the AMP caches. So this is a way how you can create. This is actually called paired AMP experiences, and a lot of publishers actually use this way.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for your question. Thank you for your answer. Question by Saurabh: how to handle perf optimization aptly if there is a dynamic element on the page which is re-rendering at relatively high rate? So this question is for you, Stephen. So
sure. So generally, what I'll say is Angular is very, very fast at doing runtime change detection and performance. So because we have this component tree, because we do a single pass change detection, it should be very, very fast. But if you have a component that maybe you're updating a lot, like the crazy example I was here is I was talking to a large financial company, and they wanted to like show 500 different stocks and re-render the prices every 50 milliseconds. Like crazy stuff, right? Like users probably can't even keep up with that. So I'll put the UX concerns aside, but let's say you wanted to do something like that. There's a lot of strategies that you can use. So one would be on push, where you take complete control of which parts of the tree you're change detecting, because the fewer components you have to re-render or update, the faster your application is going to be. You can use things like on push and observables. So you can say, hey, let's asynchronously listen to this, and then we can automatically use that async pipe to mark that component as dirty whenever something emits. So that can allow you to make sure you're not rechecking kind of large parts of the tree if you have to re-render one piece a lot. Another of these strategies is really, really focusing on the change detection, understanding when and where and why it's happening. So listening to the lifecycle events on the component, and then actually looking and saying, is this meeting my needs? That large financial company, they ended up, for their little demo, which was super contrived again, but what they ended up doing was they turned off the kind of automatic change detection. And so they ran a bunch of code outside of zones, so it wouldn't trigger change detection. And then they were manually marking things, components as dirty and change detecting them. So we don't recommend this for most Angular developers because it's harder to reason about and control and think about and manage. But you can take like complete control of change detection and say, only change detect this when I want. And then if you keep your component as finely grained as possible, Angular doesn't have to do very much work to update a string interpolation, for example. So that would be how I would focus on that performance.
Thank you for your answer, Stephen. Okay, so the next question is, our website is loading under 3 seconds. It is made on WordPress CMS. So is it good, or do we need more improvement? Moreover, do we need AMP? I mean, 3 seconds is really fast, but let's hear from the experts. So Aman or Hiren, if you want to go first.
Yeah, I mean, 3 seconds is fast, but what about 1 second? You can also achieve 1 second over there. Why not like squeeze all the performance you have? So actually, not only just the loading speed, but AMP also has one more advantage, that is AMP cache, which is not offered by any other web framework. So if you use the AMP plugin and you have a valid AMP, already valid AMP themes or plugins, you just need to install and activate a plugin, and it will be exactly like, performing better than the normal website. So I think you should give it a try.
Hiren, you want to add something?
Yeah, what Aman said does make sense, because whenever you can achieve more performance, and you can reduce loading time from 3 seconds to 1 second, definitely you should go for that. And as Aman mentioned, there is a ready-made AMP theme available for WordPress, so you can go with that, and definitely it will improve the performance. So you should give it a try.
Thank you. Thanks. Any example of AMP JavaScript? Okay. I mean.
Okay, so here question is, any example of AMP JavaScript? Means AMP has two things in terms of JavaScript. One is one as we discussed in the session, that one is the AMP.js, which is the core block of AMP framework, which handles all the things like rendering your HTML tags and streamlining your resources, asynchronous loading, blocking any external resources, and inline CSS and everything. So that is one example. That is the inbuilt JS, which takes care of everything from bootstrapping your bootstrapping for your AMP application, and managing the layout and all. Another is the third-party JavaScript, if you are mentioning. So that is also, we have discussed in the session, that you can have AMP script tag, and you can load any of your external JavaScript, and inside that you can have your DOM element, which is affected by that particular JavaScript. So this is how you can do that. So if that question refers to that, so yes, this is the two way you can have JavaScript implemented in your AMP web page.
Yep. So I think we are done with the AMA session. I mean, thanks to all the speakers for taking their time and being here. So I am sure you all deserve a huge clap. So can we just have a huge clap for all the speakers and the organizers on our chat, please? So thank you everyone, and hope you enjoyed the session, and we will just end the AMA here now. Thank you.